Okay, so I want to talk for a few minutes about this thing called a good promise. A good promise is a unique kind of performance conversation in which you fully cover all of the accomplishment ingredients and you cover the resource ingredients so that people are fully aware. So a good promise is a request plus getting a good promise means you've got to make a good request. And there are several components. If I make a request of Todd, I want to be sure that Todd knows what I want, when I want it, and why I want it. How many of you have experienced what we call the drive-by request? Where somebody just briefly comes in, hey, can you do that for me? And you're busy on your computer or you're doing whatever you're doing, and you say, sure. That's a drive-by request. That's not a conversation. That's a hit and run. And those kinds of conversations create problems in organizations because there's really been no agreement that's been worked through. So a request plus a promise in the agreement, I want to be sure that Todd knows what I want, when I want it, and why I want it. So I may actually, when I ask him, would you get this for me? I'd like you to do this report for me. I'd like it by the end of the week, and I need it for my meeting with the CIO. And can you do that? He says, yes. I said, so you're clear I want the report for the CIO? Yeah, absolutely. Because don't forget, he's busy. I got to get his attention. In today's world, you and I are we think we're multitasking. The brain's not. The brain never multitasks. It only works on one thing at a time. So if you're doing something called multitasking, attention is somewhere but not on both places. So I actually want your attention if I'm having a conversation to get a good request and a good promise. So are you clear on what is to be done by when and why? He says yes. Are you available? What do you mean, or am I available? So Todd, this is what I want. I need this report from you. I need it on this date for this purpose. Okay, no problem. So you're available to do that? Sure. So here's the conversation. There's no other projects you're working on. There's nothing else that's going to get in your way. You're really available. Have you checked your schedule to see if you're available? Schedules. I'll only say something briefly about a schedule. Mostly people's schedules are appointments in a calendar. That's mostly what they are. Most people do not keep a schedule which actually shows when they're going to do the work they're accountable for doing. They have the appointments and the meetings, but they don't have the schedule of work. So inevitably what happens is people grossly overestimate their availability for doing work, which is why people get stressed and working long hours and they get nutty and they miss deadlines because they're grossly overcommitted. So when I ask if he's available, I know in organization life, if I ask you if you're available, the odds are you're going to say yes, and I know you probably do not have a schedule that I just described to you, which means you really don't know if you're available, you think you are. A number of my students in the Mastery of Execution point out to me before they did the class, they would have told you that they always were reliable on doing what they said, they're really good at what they're doing, and they find out that they're really not. So we overestimate our ability to perform. That's why I want to have a good promise. I want to leave my conversation with Todd confident he's set up to give me what I want. Because if he's not, I'm going to pay a price, and so is he. So, are you available? Do you see anything coming down the road? And he said, well, you know, I am doing this project with my boss, and you got to know that if my boss comes through, we're waiting on this particular piece, and if my boss comes through, that's going to take priority. Oh, and that could happen between now and then? Absolutely. What's the likelihood that that's going to happen? Well, she said we'd have it by now. It hasn't come here, so I suspect it's probably pretty high. Okay, well now I have a decision. Do I want to keep going forward with Todd and take the risk, or do I want to withdraw my request and go find somebody else? So I actually want to have a conversation to find out if he's available. Also, having this conversation makes him stop what he's doing and think about, am I available? Do you have the necessary resources and know where to get them? So Todd, this report, this date, for this purpose, you're available, right? Yeah, no problem. Is there anything about this report that you see would create a problem for you, or that you know what the resources are? So yeah, that's like this report. I know who's got that data. Not an issue. I can get that very quickly. Not a problem. So that shouldn't be an issue for you? No. All right, so he now knows where the resources are and how to get them. On the other hand, it could be, well, wait a minute, as I understand what you're asking for, you want this particular part in the report. Yeah, I do. I have no idea about that. That's something new. Oh, we now have to have a conversation about how's he going to get that rather than assume, hey, I hope you're good, go find it, which is the assumption called he'll figure it out. Is there anything in your way? Is there anything else that we've talked about that could be in the way of you successfully getting anything done? I want to have a conversation with him in which I leave confident that he is clear he's making a promise to me, and that I'm clear that he's actually made a promise to me. And I'll finally ask him at the end, after we've had this, and Todd says, yes, I know where that is and it's available, and I see how I could do that. I said, so, and I asked him, so are you accepting my request? And he says, yes. Now, if you've never had that kind of conversation, and I suspect most people have not had that kind of conversation because we have assumptions in organizations called Todd's competent, it's his job to know how to do that stuff. He should figure out how to do that. I'm not going to micromanage him. You know, that's intrusive. He needs to, all that stuff. All of which is then when Todd doesn't deliver it, allows me to blame and complain Todd for, complain about and blame him for not doing that, not that I didn't have a complete conversation and actually find out. So I'm asking him, are you accepting my request? And I now know that he's made that request. He has accepted my request and that we're good to go. Yeah, absolutely. So what Todd's saying is that, you know, with some people you have to go into this conversation much deeper than you will with other people. There are people with whom you work that are highly reliable, that for you are completely dependable. You give them anything and they produce it on time. And those people, you're probably less likely to have these kinds of conversations. Then there are the people who are more wishy-washy. They're more inconsistent. Now, it's been our experience in the work that I've done that generally people only deliver at about 70% or less. So that tells you that you have a lot of people who are not very high. They're not completely count-onable. So you do have to do that. And here's one of the other risks. One of the project managers in the class this last quarter was pointing out, he says, you know, I have these conversations about these projects so frequently that I don't do this. And when I don't do this, I notice that our projects actually suffer. And he has to bring himself back because it's such a habit, what you're talking about. He got so used to doing it that, well, I don't need to do it with Todd anymore. And then Todd's performances start sliding. And he would realize that, oh, I got to go back and put those back in place. Because it looks like, you know, Todd's good. He, you know, oh, yeah, he messed that one up. Without looking to see, did I leave something out of my request? Am I not having the kinds of conversations I need to have? Did I not go all the way through with this? Did I not really check on his availability? Yeah, so there will be differences in understanding. That's what you're calling the conflict. And initiatives, when you're proposing those initiatives, there are already the stuff that's going on, which this then has to vie for, right? And the vying for comes out of the nature of the conversation and who's behind it and what it's out to accomplish, and all that is part of what goes into calculus for sorting out priorities, right? So at this level, when you start now making requests for people, I wouldn't start doing this with anybody I hadn't been doing this with until I had a closure conversation, because you'll freak them out. So the part of what's in the background of this, which we're not specifically addressing now, is that you're going to relate to them consistent with what they said. So there's a difference between integrity and sincerity. So sincerity is, I'm well-intentioned, I really want to do that, I really meant to do that. Integrity is, you gave your word, you're either keeping your word or you're not keeping your word. And if you're not keeping your word, then you're going to clean up the fact that you didn't keep your word and own up to that. So yes, there can be that kind of consequence. I've not seen that in the class. In the class I did on execution, people have no authority over the people around them. The only thing they have are access to these conversations, and you'll see this at the end. They're able to dramatically increase the level of performance of people just by doing this. So yes, you can run into a conflict, but the conflict would be of the form, so Todd, are you available? Oh, geez, I'm really not. Okay, well, so now I have a choice. I can say, too bad, do it anyway, and what do you think will happen? He might do it, he might not, depending on what other things are in the hopper, and then he'll give me a good excuse later. Or I can now withdraw it and go actually find somebody who is in a position to do it, or change the parameters in which I work. Or he may say, look, I really do want to do that for you, but if you'll notice from my schedule, I'm not available. I said, well, let me see your schedule, assuming he works with me or for me. Well, okay, well, how about if we take this one out and change your priorities and free you up and do that? He can now have a conversation in which that stuff gets worked out. All that occurs here in the performance conversation. Because I'm not interested in getting a yes. I'm interested in getting the promise fulfilled. You already get lots of yeses, and they're not being fulfilled. They're not being accomplished. So, yes, I agree with you that you can run into the conflict. But that's part of what the conversation is for. If you're unwilling to have the conversation, what do you think happens to the conflict? Pardon me? It gets suppressed. And if it gets suppressed, what do you do with people that you're really pissed off at? You make them pay, don't you? They are going to pay. So if you get it suppressed and you say, well, I got my yes. Sherry said yes. But Sherry's not happy about it. And she didn't get to voice her concerns and her issues and point all that stuff out. Trust me, I'm going to pay. I may not pay now. It's a Fram oil commission, or Fram oil filter. You can pay me now or pay me later. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You know that that's part of what's going on. So I completely agree with you, Joe. There are those issues, but that's part of why you want to have the conversation, so that the issues that are there for people and being able to accomplish what you're interested in becomes available. The thing that's most missed in this one, and some of you, nature of your work, you may be easier. Most people have a very hard time putting deadlines in a request. It's the single most left out thing. So that's the hardest part.